Hello and welcome to another episode of the podcast where we talk about challenges that business owners and entrepreneurs have had to push through to get to where they are today. Today's guest is Nick Heaney, who is the CEO of Puntaa. Now, Puntaa is a social betting app which brings about a whole range of unique challenges to growing a business like that, which Nick details in quite a lot of detail in this podcast, from regulation challenges to just the general stigma of having a gaming startup. I want to just give you a quick sneak peek of one of Nick's stories now. Do you think at any stage that, you know what, we're not going to be able to get a banking partner or a financial, partner in this?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Damon and I had a few honest words in the cars driving between banks and providers over a few months. We dealt with one where we spent 4 months going through their process. We worked through several layers of management and approval, and then, one day got an email, not even a phone call, saying, "Look, sorry, we can't support this. This is from someone in America who probably had absolutely no idea about our product. We'd been dealing with the Australian, iteration of their business, and then someone up above just decided to put a red line through it. And it's frustrating when you're pinning your hopes, but that's startups. I'm sure all your guests have similar stories, but just of a different vein in some other facet.
Hello and welcome to the Be The Push podcast. My name is Jack Ferguson, and I'm going to be sharing with you stories of how business owners and entrepreneurs had to push through the hard times in their careers. We're going to be discussing the lessons learned from these experiences while arming you with actionable advice so you can be the push when you need it most. Show notes can be found at bethepush.com/podcast and clicking on the relevant episode link. Let's get started. So we have that story coming up amongst many others in this discussion. Nick talks about some of the challenges that go along with outsourcing your tech. So the guys at Puntaa outsourced their tech to a team over in Estonia, and Nick breaks down how that ended up. Steve Baxter talked about in a recent episode how important it is for him if he's going to invest in a company that they have their own internal tech team. Nick in this episode really details what that can look like if you do outsource your tech and how it can go wrong. He also talks about raising capital and a few of the challenges they had with doing that. They've raised a couple of rounds, and also what it's like to build a startup with a stigma. So Puntaa is a social betting app, and despite the fact they take social responsibility very seriously, there's still that stigma that they have to deal with everywhere they go, and a lot of the regulations and rules that go along with having something in the gaming industry. So that's quite a unique challenge that these guys have, and it was really fascinating to hear about how that plays out on a day-to-day basis. All right, I'm not going to talk any longer. Let's get into the episode. I hope you enjoy. All right, so today we're here with Nick Heaney. Nick, how you going?
Good, thanks, Jack. Yourself?
Not too bad. So, Nick, you're the CEO and co-founder of Puntaa, amongst a range of other things, but do you want to talk us through what you've done so far in your career?
Sure. So I grew up over in Singapore for a few years and then moved back to the Sunshine Coast and then made my way down to the University of Queensland here in Brisbane. While I was there, I studied law and business management and probably was looking to go down a legal career at one stage, but didn't have too much success in the application process when I was leaving university, and decided that business and management consulting was actually a path that I was probably better suited towards. So I spent 4 years at PwC, 4 to 5 years in management consulting there, and that was mainly around operations, finance, strategy consulting with, the resources boom when it was going on. So a number of the blue chip clients in that space, as well as some of the healthcare and a range of other clients while I was working through that.
Right. So just before you go on, so you did 4 years at law school, was it? Did you say?
So I did 6 years at university, and that was 4.5 I guess 4 was mainly law, and a couple of business sort of intermingled together.
And did you do any work in law after that?
So I did get admitted about 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
Just for a 6-month period, I went and worked at a law firm, basically to get that final tick.
Yeah.
And went through the sort of commercial legal practice and realised that it probably still wasn't for me.
Right, okay.
But yeah, I've always sort of been more attracted probably to the business side of things, and initially went into PwC and was looking to build my skill set around that, and probably got enticed with my first business, Max 7 Technologies. So I was an initial early stage investor in that, and that was probably about 8 years ago now. And that's a healthcare IT business that reverse merged onto the ASX last year. And so that really whet my appetite. I was very naive and learnt a lot through that sort of 8-year journey. I co-invested with my old man in that. Okay. And it was probably a really eye-opening journey as to technology, investment, just seeing the roller coaster that startups are. And watching that unfold over the last 8 years has been a really awesome and educational journey.
And you didn't run away?
No, I didn't. I actually then doubled down and started my first startup, Stepsy. Or I actually came on board. That'd probably be a little bit rude of me to say I started it. I came on board with a couple of other co-founders. They'd already kicked it off. It was a bit of an eclectic group of guys. We had 2 guys based in Norway. They were Australian guys, an Italian, and then myself based back here in Brisbane. And it was an online project management and collaboration tool. Okay. Sort of in the Asana Slack mold, but a very inferior version, looking back in hindsight. But yeah, so that was probably 2 years into my journey at PwC. I decided to, the best way to learn is to go out and do something yourself and make the mistakes and travel that sort of journey. And so I decided naively that, I'd get involved in this. I wanted to, dip my toe in the water and really see what it was all about. And we probably went about things the whole wrong way in terms of I was more interested in starting a business rather than really dealing and tackling with a problem, understanding the customer and their significant issues, and then really tailoring a solution. So, yeah, I didn't go about it the right way. But, hindsight is a wonderful thing sometimes, and we learn a lot of hard lessons. But it's helped set us on our different entrepreneurial journeys from there. And can you explain what you mean by you're more interested in the business side as opposed to solving a real problem? What do you mean by that? In terms of the business side versus the legal side was probably what I was inferring. So with the legal, it was generally, I guess, tweaking language and working documentation to deliver an outcome, whereas with a lot of the business stuff, it was often, really solving a core need for a client or a customer and actually delivering, a viable solution and figuring that process out. And that to me seemed like a more enjoyable journey. And then I guess the next step was, why do it for someone else and why not sort of go on the journey myself?
Gotcha. So then you started Puntaa, I assume? Yeah, so it was. I was still at PwC at the time. We were still working on Stepsy in after hours, weekends, mornings, whenever we had the spare time. Damon, my co-founder, he was based in Norway at the time, working in oil and gas, and he was doing Stepsy on the side as well. And then Jordan, our third co-founder in Puntaa, he was a corporate bookie. So he'd worked at Ladbrokes, and then he was working in Vanuatu at the time. And basically Damon and he came up with the initial concept. They were sitting around, 4 or 5 guys watching a game of footy, everyone sort of bantering and, saying I'll put $5 down on, a certain outcome. And then the typical scenario, a couple of guys are reliable and a couple of guys aren't. And I know the types. Worst blokes. The ones that don't pay up.
Exactly. So basically Jordan and Damon looked into the concept conceptually, found that there wasn't really anything in the marketplace. There was one very early stage competitor in the UK. Right. And we felt, they felt at the time that there was a really good opportunity there. but obviously, like all things in fintech and in gaming, heavily regulated space.
Yeah.
So they consulted with some lawyers, and Damon gave me a call one night and said, look, do you mind having a look over our business plan as well as some of the fundamental sort of legal conversations we've had?
Mm-hmm.
And, there's also, the lawyers have identified 16 different state and federal documents, Commonwealth documents. Maybe you could have a skim of those out of the kindness of your heart. So,
yeah, sounds fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like all good legal precedent, it's always enjoyable and a long read.
Yeah.
I basically thought that there was definitely some potential in the overall concept,
mm-hmm.
and we've always helped each other out in different facets. So, why not dive in, spend a few days helping the guys out and having a look at it. And we went through it, and it looked like conceptually there was an opportunity there.
Yep.
So I said to the guys, look, I'd like to be part of this if you're interested, and tackle that realm, the commercial, legal side of things for the business, if there's some interest there. And the guys, thankfully, were keen to have me on board, and that was sort of the start of the journey, at least for me. So Damon had already sort of started wireframing the concept while he was in Norway and Estonia.
Yep.
And he'd sort of got some of those mock-ups done early. The guys had conceptually done a business plan up, and they'd talked to the solicitors at that point, and that's sort of where I got involved, sort of 2 or 3 months into the really early planning of the business.
Right.
And
so you guys were friends?
So Damon and I knew each other probably 10 years through university days, and then
mm-hmm.
Jordan is Damon's brother, so
mm-hmm.
they obviously have a reasonably close connection.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, so I want to go into how it all started a little bit more, but before we do that, your story actually sounds a bit similar to mine with what you did at university. So you went there and you didn't end up following through with your actual, the law sort of path, or the stereotypical law path anyway, by the sounds. How long into your degree did you know that it was probably not for you?
I think, look, I've always enjoyed the English comprehension, the thinking through analytically around problems and that sort of side of things. So I think from a young age, I always looked at a lot of these things as conceptual building blocks in helping me get to a journey. I didn't know exactly what that was going to be. And, like a lot of life experiences, you dive into things, you figure out you enjoy some parts of it, you figure out you don't enjoy other parts. And so I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go, but I just knew that this was a building block to help me get somewhere further. But I knew that I didn't want to spend 20 or 30 years in the legal profession. I think, it was probably halfway, 2/3 of the way through university. I was fortunate enough that my father, he had a very good friend who started the healthcare IT tech company.
Cool. Yep.
And I threw in what very limited life savings I had at that point.
Yeah.
Through working as a dishy at a local cafe at 14,
right,
and 15, and then basically from that, I'd already started on that journey before I'd even started university, and it interested me, but I didn't really know what it was all about. You're 18, 19, you don't really understand how the world works, or, as you get older, you get a little bit of better idea, but I'm still thoroughly learning.
So when you invested quite young, by the sounds, like, you don't hear a lot of investors at your age. Did that help you guys with the investors you got on board? Like, were you able to be a bit more empathetic, do you think?
I think so. I think I was fortunate in that I was always very interested in the share market and those sorts of things at a very young age. So I was, trading shares.
Oh, right.
But not very successfly, and not with any great deal of money. But it was always an interest and an area that I sort of had some passion in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the exposure to that, the exposure to an early stage tech business, and just watching that unfold, that sort of, I think in the back of my mind, always going through university, sort of the whole investment space and the tech space were two areas that I was reasonably passionate about, and that I saw that then law and business management would provide sort of building blocks to potentially push me into those areas in time and provide a skill set and a network around that.
Yeah. Well, you're probably the first person on the podcast to say that the university helped you with your business. So that's a first for us here. I'm always canning it. So it's good to hear the other side of it every now and then.
I think, it it was more a framework to approaching problems. I couldn't tell you a lot of the core concepts from university. Probably very few. Probably on one hand, but I think it was more. You know, you build a network of friends and peers. You get exposed to a number of things, and you hopefully build a skill set around approaching problems and stuff like that. And I think it was more that sort of practical side of things rather than any specific knowledge that I got out of a course.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense. So we talk about on this podcast times that you had to push through that were particularly tough times. So do you have some stories for us from the early days of Puntaa?
Yeah, we've got a few.
Hit us with it.
We've had a few journeys. Probably the first is the fact that none of us are technical co-founders. And in hindsight, I'd probably we've always been reminded of this by Steve Baxter when we were going through the Mira-D accelerator. And
he said that about 5 episodes ago.
But yeah, for us, it always came back to me that I'm not going to let that stop me. But at the same time, I probably wouldn't go down the same path again if I had the option and I had the network of technical people that I now am friends and peers with. But for us, we had an idea. There was nothing in the market, or there was a very early stage competitor in the UK. We'd designed a product before in Estonia, so Stepsy that I talked about before. But Jono, our other co-founder in Stepsy, he'd basically lived in Estonia and helped manage that. Even though he wasn't a technical co-founder, at least he could sit with the team over there.
So your developers were in Estonia?
Yeah. Okay. So the developers both for Stepsy and then stage 1 of Puntaa were in Estonia. So Damon moved from Norway to Estonia, and he started working with both a designer over there to mock up the wireframes, and then sat down with a local developer over there who had a team, and basically started the conceptual version of Puntaa, so version 1.
Yep.
And I guess we were probably, again, a little bit naive in terms of just how much there is to a product that we were building in the space. So not only are we dealing with payments and fintech, but we were building a Facebook or a social media platform, and then on top of that, a differentiated gaming platform. So we're trying to sort of fit 3 things together. And probably for an MVP, we were a little bit exuberant around what we could just get into a product.
Gotcha. And you guys were funding it, I assume?
Yeah, so we bootstrapped between the 3 of us what savings we had from our prior jobs, and we basically gave the wireframes, and Damon sat down with the guys, and it all seemed to work reasonably well for the first couple of months. But then at that point, Damon, to conserve funds, moved back in with his parents back here in Brisbane, so he flew back from Estonia.
Yep.
I'd quit my job. I moved back up to the coast, Sunshine Coast, and Jordan was still in sunny Vanuatu working at his current job, or current for the time.
Yep. And did you move back in with your folks as well?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So I was fortunate. They lived on the Sunshine Coast, so it's not a bad part of the world. Yeah. I get on well with my parents, so that always helps things. But
there's worse places to go, that's for sure.
As a 30-year-old man, you're not garnering to move back in with your parents for an extended period of time at that sort of age, but these things
adds
happen.
To the drama.
So we'd basically we'd moved home, and we were looking to project manage this tech project from Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast remotely, the 2 of us, into Estonia. And just, the communication really started to fall apart. We wouldn't get contact for several days at a time. I think it was that sort of realisation that, if we're building something like Snapchat where people aren't relying on money and verification and, a whole range of things around legal compliance, we could maybe get away with it. But if we're going to start to, take clients' funds, have to meet all our regulatory obligations, a whole raft of things that realistically this approach wasn't going to work. We persisted with it for another couple of months. You always hope that things will resolve themselves. Yeah. But I think, the biggest challenge for us was just other than obviously the blatant lack of communication, was the fact that we didn't know how to call bullshit, essentially. Is it the fact that this is taking 3 times as long because it is 3 times as challenging, or is it just because they've got 3 other jobs on and we're being pushed further down the pile, or for, a whole range of other reasons? So it was a difficult decision for us, but we we ended up cutting ties and paying a portion of the full fee and basically getting a waiver and full rights to the IP. And that was, a nerve-wracking experience for some early-stage founders around, how does that all play out?
Yeah.
Is the IP ours? What does this process look like? So there was a steep learning curve around some of those elements. At the same time, we were then obviously looking for our next development resource, ideally closer to home, someone we could work with reasonably closely. And that's when we transitioned to a Brisbane-based developer and literally pushed everything to the side and started from scratch. So we didn't use a single thing that we developed in those sort of 5 months at that point. So
I'm wondering, did you stick with it a bit longer because you thought to yourself that maybe, you put in these funds, you put in this effort? Was that the mentality of why you stuck with it a little bit longer, or what made you stick with it?
I think that there were points where they would actually be really productive and deliver to schedule, and then it would fall away for a bit, and then it would come back, and you're sort of hoping, look, maybe this is a one-off or every now and then scenario, and then it just got worse and worse over time. Okay. So there was that. There was probably a little bit of naivety, to be honest, around you don't the more that you're involved in something and the more you've put into it, the less the harder it is to sort of walk away from something like that. So I definitely think there was probably a part of that as well.
Were the invoices coming in on time from their end?
Yeah, that was probably the only thing that was coming in on time. and a reminder email if they weren't paid on time.
Gotcha.
But we even tried to pay everything on time and be really, we were trying to be totally open, transparent.
Yep.
Do everything right on our end, so there was absolutely no recourse for them to say, look, you didn't provide us with designs on time, or you didn't pay us, or whatever it was. I always go in with the belief that you put your best foot forward on all those sorts of things, and hopefully they come back to you. And that's life doesn't always treat you that way. So so we learnt some hard lessons there, and I don't know that a technical co-founder probably would have helped that much even in that scenario. I think it was just a lost relationship, and things started off really well in terms of, Damon sitting with the guys, the relationship that was built. They're actually, Damon has a personal relationship with the guy. He's a good guy. It's just, I don't think, in terms of they were building much bigger products, probably much bigger budgets, and we just were shunted to the side as a result. And that's how the cookie crumbles, and we made the tough call to cut ties and start again and move on.
Was there something that triggered that? Did something happen that you just like, screw this, we're getting out of this, or was it just
I think it was just an accumulation of frustration.
Gotcha.
At some point you've just got to make a call on certain things, and after you get jilted the third or fourth time, you're a sucker yourself if you keep going back for punishment. So we decided that it was time to make that call.
Gotcha.
And it wasn't easy, and there was we definitely deliberated on it a little bit, and then we just said, look, it's going to be painful, but it's probably going to be more painful. The reality of the situation was, can we look back in 12 months, and if we're still going down this path and we can't meet our legal obligations, and we have any concern about clients getting their payments and a whole raft of things, do we really think that that's going to be delivered? If it's not, well, then we can't go down this path any further. So it was a tough one, but
right. And how did you know that you couldn't use any of the IP? Like, how did that come about? That you just had to ditch it all?
So we were dealing with as we saw this sort of unfolding, so in the latter half, we started to contact local Brisbane-based developers. So we were hanging out at the River City Labs when we had the opportunity to, and speaking with the mentors there, with Pete Laurie and Darren Rogan and guys like that, and basically putting feelers out for people in the industry that might be able to help us initially, just sort of help project manage, or are we making mistakes? The question was, are we doing a poor job of technically project managing this project? And thankfully the feedback was, look, this is just a general project management failure from the other end. But we started to talk to those guys, and we got assistance in finding a suitable sort of replacement over here to help us launch that. He reviewed the code base and just said, I can spend X number of months basically trying to polish something that's not great to begin with, or I can start from scratch and we can go from there. And at least, I'll be, when I say him will be perfectly comfortable because it's his own code base and knows everything intimately from there.
Gotcha. Can I ask how much you guys spent on that initial?
Yeah, sure.
build?
So we budgeted about 40,000 Australian for the end-to-end product, and we ended up paying 10,000 in fees, which they wanted close to the full amount, and we negotiated it down to the 10.
Okay.
And at the time, I thought we might use the IP, which is probably why we even paid as much as we did.
Yep.
And then in hindsight. But at the same time, work and hours were contributed, and I felt that they'd done at least that, even if they hadn't done it perfectly in good faith. But at the same time, I don't believe in sort of burning those sorts of bridges for the sake of it or being vindictive. So,
gotcha.
It was a tough situation.
Sure. So now you move on and you get a local developer. You had to start again.
We did.
So could you use any of the wireframes or anything you guys had done? Or?
Yeah, so the actual design elements, we were, and don't get me wrong, we learnt a lot during that process. So we were iterating, we were talking to customers, we were showing them versions of the product, even though, vast swaths of it weren't working. But we could step through product and wireframes at the same time. And so we were continually iterating. So it wasn't like we hadn't learnt a lot, and we ended up, during that journey, basically we had to organise banks, payment providers, a whole range of things, and they changed several times, and that's probably a whole range of stories in and of itself. So from that, it was about March, April of last year, and we started that entire process again. During the middle of that year, then we applied for the Mura D program. And during that sort of period, that 4 or 5 months, we rebuilt the product itself. And then we applied to get in there. Probably during that time, some of the biggest challenges were just around getting a banking provider to work with us, as well as a payment provider. So obviously I won't go into any specific names, but we met with the vast majority of banks, both small and large in Australia, and went through outright rejections from people who said they were technology supporting banks through to some of the bigger banks that just didn't want to touch it from a brand risk perspective, which I understand. And then payment providers, we tried to work with a number of them, and the instant association with gaming and gambling is often just a red flag that they don't want to touch, regardless of the fact that we were trying to offer something social, differentiated, something that we felt was totally different to the existing products out there and a lot more socially responsible. So that those were definitely challenges. So in the end, we ended up having to. I put maybe one of the things I did take from university was my accounting 101 degree to build out some of our back end transactional systems. And fortunately, our first. Our CTO, his father's an accountant, so we've leveraged some of his skill set in the spare time. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of challenges around just not only trying to get the platform off the ground, but then the whole banking payments piece, which is fundamentally a core part of our business. Because we had a few competitors out there that offer the ability to place wages with your friends, but it's an IOU, so you've still got to chase them up for the money, which sort of defeats the purpose of the concept. So unless we could get that component in and get it sorted and working pretty seamlessly. So we were fortunate enough to find a Brisbane-based provider who actually worked out to be, we actually talked with a couple of guys and they led us down a bit of a path, and then we were fortunate enough to find someone who was really honest and open with us about, how the process works, and we were fortunate, and he gave us a lot of guidance, and we ended up becoming a client of theirs, and really happy with the transaction.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that was sort of a 4 or 5 month ordeal. So by this stage, we then got into the Mura D accelerator. We were really fortunate. That in itself was a bit of a journey.
Just before you go into that, I was just wondering, did you think at any stage that we're not going to be able to get a banking partner or a financial, partner this.
Definitely.
Yeah.
David and I had a few honest words in the cars driving between banks and providers over a few months. We dealt with one where we spent 4 months going through their process. We worked through several layers of management and approval, and then, one day got an email, not even a phone call, saying, look, sorry, we can't support this. This is from someone in America who probably had absolutely no idea about our product. We'd been dealing with the Australian, iteration of their business, and then someone up above just decided to put a red line through it. And it's frustrating when you're pinning your hopes, but that's startups. I'm sure all your guests have similar stories, but just of a different vein in some other facet.
Yeah, but I think you're unique in the sense that you have the. I suppose would you call it somewhat of a stigma around gaming, and so it's a social betting app, right? But,
definitely.
There's probably not a lot of startups that I know at all that have gone into that space.
No,
well, I suppose that's why you went there.
Right? Exactly. There's a lot of high barriers to entry.
Yeah,
and that comes with its pros and its cons.
Yeah.
So for us, our latest challenge is we are currently based out of Norfolk Island.
Okay.
That's where Ladbrokes and a number of other ASX listed and other operators were based.
Yeah.
The Commonwealth, in all its wisdom, decided 2 weeks ago to basically revoke all licences and provide 31 March 2017 to transition to another legislation or shut the doors.
Wow.
So that's our latest challenge. But like all good business planning, you identify your early risks and your mitigation strategy. So that's been on the plate as a potential risk for a long time, and we've been tackling that for a while now. But it's never good news.
Yeah,
it's never enjoyable when the regulatory landscape changes under your feet yet again. But as you said, the space is ever changing, and we all providers are lumped together generally when you say that word gaming or gambling, and we look at what we're trying to do as something a lot. We're looking at it from a socially responsible perspective in terms of we're not there for a financial transaction at the end of the day. We're there around social engagement, and the money just reinforces a behaviour, and we've set a number of limits around that. So, there's a number of steps that prevent users from losing any significant amount of money, whether it's daily limits, whether it's turnover limits, whether it's the fact that on our platform, users don't actually have to pay out a bet technically at the end of the day.
Oh, right. Okay.
But through social, I guess, ratings and those sorts of things, people feel obliged because, at the end of the day, you're on there to put a $5 bet down with your friend. It goes into escrow. You're going to pay your $5. And if you don't, then your friends will see that. But we're not about a financial transaction of, $5,000 on a horse race and, win and lose that. We're about the engagement and the social piece. And I think sometimes that gets lost immediately when we talk to banks, payment providers, people in general, and that's part of one of our challenges to overcome. Yeah,
I suppose the advantage of that is that if you do get over those barriers, it's going to be hard for people to come up behind you.
Definitely, I think. It's I guess the one silver lining with Norfolk closing is that it was probably a gateway for still extremely challenging to launch a gaming business in this country unless you're one of a select few that has an extensive background or extensive capital and connections in that space. And Norfolk was probably one avenue that allowed smaller startups like ourselves to potentially get into the market and trial some things. We wouldn't be able to go to one of the few other licensing jurisdictions if we had to start our business from scratch. I mean, we tried. So, I can talk about that firsthand, but it's the silver lining is, look, startups aren't meant to be easy, and we got an opportunity, and the timing was right to take advantage of that opportunity. And now that window's shutting, and now we've got to look at the next window and move in that direction. So
I definitely see the need. The amount of times I've made a bet with someone and they just don't pay up socially.
Always happy to help.
But I would like to talk about, so you went through the Mira D accelerator here in Brisbane, Telstra-backed accelerator, to my understanding. That's right, isn't it? Yeah.
So Telstra backed, and they partnered with River City Labs to expand into Brisbane. So they've often got their own version. So in Sydney, I think Singapore, it's solely Mira D, and then they sometimes look for a partner in other cities.
Yep. And what was that process like in your, I suppose, in your in Puntaa's career? What was that significant? What did you learn there?
Yeah, it was really positive. So for us, as I talked about, we went through a bunch of trials and tribulations, even prior to that, with trying to get funding, basically the Estonian debacle, finding a tech lead or resource here in Brisbane, and then getting version 2 of our product out. So that's before we applied to Mira D. We applied. I think there were potentially about 80 applicants. We were fortunate enough. I went along to a pitch night. I pitched and got fast tracked through to, I think, the final 15 or 20.
Yep.
Or maybe it was something around that. And then there was a boot camp with, I think, about 15 teams over a weekend long process where they basically tried to unsettle us in a few different ways and throw a few curveballs and see how you handle a bunch of different situations, which is fair enough. Not everyone's cut out to be in startup land. And
amen to that.
Yeah, it's not an easy journey, and I think they're just trying to make sure that the people that they admit into the program are the people that are truly committed to it. That are willing to drop everything if they haven't already and commit 110%. So for us, it was really positive because at that stage, Damon and I were living, on separate ends of the coast. I was up on the Sunshine Coast. Damon was in Brisbane and Jordan was in Vanuatu, and he was still working. But we were looking for the right time. I think he'd just quit a few weeks before. We were looking for the right time to sort of how we're going to all come together, how we're going to make this work. We don't have a whole lot of cash in the bank.
Right.
And this was an opportunity, so we actually got a share house together and moved in together. We were fortunate enough to get into the program itself, and then it's just been, we're still in the share house. Somehow we work together all day and we live together. But we haven't had too many fights, which is I find kind of remarkable after 2 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, maybe they're just two extremely tolerant guys.
Right. Can you turn off in that environment there? Because that must remind you of Puntaa all the time.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think every now and then we get away for, every second or third weekend, guys will go their separate directions and do, what it is they need to do to clock off. But with our business, we've also got to have someone on the keyboard pretty much 24/7 from our client, funds perspective as well. So customer management, all those sides of things. So that has to be rotated around and managed. But just going back to the Mira D, really positive in the respect that we were all together for the first time, super focused on what we had to do. And Aaron Birkby, who ran the program, entrepreneur in residence, he's a superstar. He was just really good for our, holding us accountable, personal development, calling out bullshit. At the end of the day, making sure that we're on track and on task with what we needed to do, and that always helps. And it's nice. Nice that there was someone else along that journey sort of helping give us a bit of guidance after we'd spent 9 months working remotely and doing all these sorts of things to come together. And I think also the cohort, the fact that there are 4 or 5 other teams all on different parts of the journey, but all having gone through broadly similar experiences. You can chat to someone next to you and say, look, what marketing software do you use? Have you tried this? And you'll get 5 different opinions. It'll be vigorously debated, and then you'll come to a solution rather than jumping on Google and hoping for the best. So there are a whole raft of things. Also the funding that we got was really positive in terms of it allowed us to get the 2-minute noodles and keep them going.
Oh, right. That's important.
Exactly. A little bit of sustenance. Get a roof over our heads and come together, and the mentors and the master classes were really positive as well, just in terms of, there's so many things that you've got to be across, and actually having people that understand them, that you can bounce ideas off, that you can, run your marketing plan or your social media strategy, or, we're looking to fundraise, talk to people who have done it several times before. That's just invaluable sort of experience that you can leverage.
Cool. So when you went into the program, you hadn't raised any money at that stage, is that right?
We just raised prior to a couple of weeks prior.
So okay.
We raised a sort of small pre-seed round, around $100,000.
Yep.
And that was essentially so we could start to bring on our own technical team.
Yeah.
Or start to look at that. And as well as, we didn't know we were getting into Mura-D at that stage. So we were trying to move in together and make a bunch of different things work. And unfortunately, the funds were rapidly dwindling at that stage. So we needed to bring some outside investment in.
Mm-hmm. And what was that process like? I mean, because it sounds you guys must have done it on your own at that point, right? Without any guidance, because this is prior to the program.
Correct. So I'd had a little bit of fundraising experience just with the healthcare IT company that I've been involved in, but that was sort of latter stage financing. But in saying that, with a legal background and some of that experience, I at least had a reasonable handle on shareholders' agreements, share issues, those sorts of things. So that was a positive. But in terms of the actual process of going and selling a business, selling myself, selling a business, selling the team, it was definitely, a steep learning curve. And, the only way you can really do it is get out there, get rejected a bunch of times and learn from it and, keep refining what you're doing as a result.
And how did you get access to those investors in the beginning?
Just basically hustle. So we, identified through my network, through Damon's network, guys that we knew that were generally in the space, who knew angels, who knew, and just asked people, who do you have access to that are high net worths? I knew a few that were on the Sunshine Coast, and just, through mutual friends, because a warm introduction is always better. Reach out to them and say, do you have time for a cup of coffee? I'd love to, get your thoughts on, what we're doing and, see if there's an opportunity there. Yeah. It was just really just hustle, and we didn't have a whole lot of, networks around it. It was more, just finding a few nodes and asking them to introduce us to relevant parties. And we probably touched base with the first round wasn't too bad. It was probably, we only spoke to maybe 15, 20 people.
Oh, right. Okay.
And we found 2 investors out of that process.
Gotcha.
Potentially because we weren't raising, a huge amount of money. I mean, don't get me wrong, 100,000 is still a lot of money. I'd like to have that in my back pocket right now. But, in the scheme of, startups and all the rest of it, it's if you find 2 or 3 investors for someone who's a high net worth, they're putting those sorts of sums into early stage businesses, and more, thankfully, in the ecosystem these days.
Yep. So, did any of them run away because of the gambling stigma, or the gaming stigma, should I say?
There were definitely, there were a few people that you generally put the concept in front of, and they were always polite about it, but they just say, look, this is not in my wheelhouse, or I don't have an appetite for this, and that's perfectly fine, and we fully expect, whether that's customers, whether that's investors, whatever it is, there's always going to be people that don't understand it, or just have an aversion to it, and that's perfectly acceptable and fine. And as we were courteous with them, they were courteous with us, and we still keep in correspondence, because you never know. But at the time, a lot of the there weren't many actually, but there's always a few people that that don't have an appetite for that space, and that's perfectly acceptable. Yeah,
very cool. Okay, so and then you raised your next round, did you? Shortly after?
So we near the end of the Mura-D accelerator. We raised a seed round of 750,000.
Right.
And that was a little bit more painful.
I can imagine.
So that journey, we spoke with probably 50 investors. We were fortunate in that we met a couple of potential cornerstone investors that saw the opportunity. I think anyone that's been around the gaming space understands that there is there's potentially a huge market there. offering something differentiated. It's constantly evolving, like a lot of the different industries these days. And if you can do something differentiated and you can prove it on scale, there's also a strong M&A culture in the industry as well.
Right,
So from an investor perspective, it can be quite appealing if they believe you're the team to execute on whatever this differentiated vision is.
Yeah.
We started that process. I had a big spreadsheet, thankfully through Mura D, and just over the year that it evolved, I built a bunch of further connections and started to just leverage those for warm introductions. But funnily enough, when we were raising our first round, we'd met a guy who wasn't with our most recent investor at the time. He was just freelancing, but he was interested in putting in money, but we didn't end up agreeing on terms for our first round.
Yep.
And then he joined Altor Capital, who were our cornerstone for the seed round. And he obviously would have had discussions with the guys internally in the team about past opportunities and all the rest. And Damon was wearing his branded T-shirt, walking down past River City, down past Eagle Street Pier.
Right.
And one of the investors at Altor actually ran out, grabbed him, and gave him the card and said, let's have a chat. What are you guys up to these days? And that was
brilliant.
Yeah, slightly fortuitous. And from there, we started the conversation with them again, and that they were always. They were really supportive of what we're doing, but obviously firm negotiators on terms, like we were on our end, like most discussions. But really positive in the respect that they'd exited a business to a gaming operator before. Personally, one of the guys they'd invested in Tapper and Chimp Change, so two payment platforms, one of which is social payments in the States, but started out here in Queensland. Recently listed, I think, on the ASX. So they had a fair bit of experience in fintech, in social, in gaming. They'd exited, they really ticked all the boxes, particularly for us here in Brisbane. Sometimes you don't, have the large investment pool with the experience you're looking for. Yeah. So we're really fortunate, and we also get on well with the guys. So I think that's a big part of it. Do they, is there a cultural fit there?
Yeah.
Do they understand the how you want to operate a business, and can they see the vision and all those sorts of things? And they were always really supportive from day one with what we're doing. But obviously we had to agree on evaluation and terms and all those fun things.
Yeah.
But
how important was that to get along with them and like them? Because obviously you've got all the back end in the shareholder agreements, like your shit there, right?
Yeah.
But then there might have been, I'm assuming, maybe a couple of people willing to give you money, but how important was it to actually like them?
I think it's a big part, because it's essentially a marriage, and if things go well or they go poorly, you're going to be tied to these people for an extended period, and you want to you want that trust to be there. You want those open, honest conversations, and I think a big part of that is actually getting on with the people that you're dealing with professionally as well. You don't have to, but I think with anything in life, if you can deal with them in a professional manner, but also get along with them from a personal perspective, it just makes things easier at the end of the day.
Right.
Not everyone's probably that fortunate in that like most startups, at the end of the day, you need to keep the lights on, and you're looking for someone strategic. You're looking for someone who you can build a relationship with and you want to work intimately with over the next several years. But at the end of the day, also, if your burn's going to run out and someone's offering you cash, that's the next best solution. You're probably going to take that. But we were fortunate that before that all happened, we got our cornerstone in place, and I was often led to believe that is a downhill run from there to close the smaller investors, but we actually found that much more difficult.
Oh, right, okay.
Potentially because, the more sophisticated individuals understand how the process works, and they're potentially less likely to squabble over, a small change in valuation or X and Y because they see the bigger picture, and, in the scheme of things, it's not going to make or break a deal.
Yeah, they're going to win or lose, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You're either getting portfolio theory, you're getting a huge return. Yeah. A few will make a few times and then the others will go bust. So whether you're getting a valuation that's a couple of percent higher or lower or a couple of terms, generally it's not going to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And most of the sophisticated guys that we dealt with were pretty founder friendly, which was really positive.
Cool.
But not to say that, they weren't batting hard for what they wanted, and we weren't as
yeah.
well.
Yep.
So yeah, we were fortunate, but then from there, the sort of closing that last 200K was actually really difficult. So we were fortunate that the first round of investors, the first two, put in a nice amount again, and Altor put in a solid amount, and we had 2 or 3 other smaller investors. But just closing that last sort of 100,000, which was the whole deal was contingent on getting the full amount, which made it slightly harder to sleep at night.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, 2.5 months in, we're thinking it's all, not saying it's going well, or smoothly by any stretch, but, we'd managed it, and it had gone about as smoothly as a seed round you'd hope could go at this stage. And then
it plateaued a little, did it?
Yeah, and then we spent probably another 2.5 months just closing out that last little bit and paperwork, and, it's never... It never goes as smoothly or as fun as you want it to be, but it's a welcome day when the final piece of paperwork's signed, and you can actually, it's probably a welcome relief when the money actually lands in the bank account, and you go, okay, you have a quick cheap passion pop or a champagne or a beer, and then get back to work and go, okay, well, what was this money for? And that's really to grow the value of the business. And hire the right people, and that's that was what we were selling. And then that was sort of the next battle was finding talented, cultural fit, technical talent at the end of the day. And there's probably several stories around that in itself again.
And that took a while to find that person as well too, did it?
Yeah, so we were fortunate enough that we actually we were looking originally for someone more senior. A CTO or a senior sort of role, but we actually got a really talented young guy on board. So we went through the QUT Code Academy. We were trying CCADs, we were trying Stack Overflow ads, we were leveraging networks, we were doing a whole raft of things, and it's probably out of all the challenges. The people side of things and the hiring is, getting the right people is it makes or breaks your business. And we've been very fortunate that while it's been an extremely difficult road to get the 3 talented guys we have at the moment, we were very fortunate that we picked right. Not to say we didn't get jilted a couple of times along the journey.
Right. And when you when you did meet these guys, did you know straight away?
It was difficult for us because until we got, the first couple on, it's reasonably easy to, ask the right questions about values, culture, or, but even then it's, I guess it's not easy because people can often put
say
on
whatever.
Yeah, exactly. They'll tell you what you want to hear. And, even if you think you've got all the surety in the world that you've hired the right person, you don't really know until 3-6 months down the road. That's just the reality of the situation. But we were reasonably confident in that we did pretty extensive background checks. We talked to people that had worked with these people before. You do all the standard things you do in hiring and trying to get the right people. But again, the difficult part for me and for the other co-founders is that we're not technical by trade. So if someone comes and talks to me about finance or operations or strategy or those sorts of things, I can generally get a pretty good feel within half an hour of whiteboarding and talking through these ideas and okay, they know their stuff or they don't. Technical, what's the difference between Java and JavaScript? So and I still struggle for that answer. So that was actually a question with our junior developer that was asked by Damon in the interview. So that was a funny moment. But that was probably our biggest challenge. And to sort of mitigate that, we brought on board guys like Darren Rogan and Pete Laurie and some really influential guys in the ecosystem and, asked for their opinion and asked them to, ask, some of the more technical questions and maybe even do have a look at their GitHub or do a code review or the things that I wouldn't have the first clue about doing, but you need someone to be doing that to provide you with that surety. Yeah,
someone you can trust, hey, who's going to actually tell you whether they can code or not.
And that's the beauty of the River City and the broader startup ecosystem is that people are always willing to help, and I think that's one of the beauties of the space we're in, is that, you know, everyone's out there battling and fighting uphill and pushing rocks uphill. But, you know, generally if you ask someone to give you a hand with something, the busiest people will often be the first ones to help you out. And that's, you know, I can't speak highly enough of the whole River City Labs ecosystem, and particularly guys like Pete and Darren for helping us through that process. Because it wasn't easy.
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds pretty tough.
I might need a beer after this. Bringing back some old memories.
But I wanted to... so you guys obviously didn't think about taking up the keys at any point then?
In terms of...
learning to code?
I just think with the space we're in, and maybe that's a cop-out, and Steve Baxter definitely let us know about it a couple of times. But just, I guess, until you get into a space like gaming, fintech, and particularly gaming, it is just a minefield of regulation.
Right,
so my first priority at the end of the day is make sure we're abiding by and meeting everything we have to be doing. And there's 9 states and territories, or maybe there's 10 or 7 these days. I don't know what the exact answer is, but there's more than enough regulation. I can tell you honestly, hand on heart, that I've read a lot of it over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's the whole customer piece, where someone's literally got to be on deck pretty much 24 hours of the day. So rotating that, and then marketing, branding, you know, product development. Maybe that's a cop out of an answer, but I just felt like, you know, where our skill sets are and what we can do best. Is it better to, you know, I have a better ability to raise funds and hire the right person than spend 6 months trying to read JavaScript for dummies and screwing it all up and then crying myself to sleep at the end of the night. That's probably not the best answer in the world, and, you know, you should go out and figure these things out. But at the end of the day, you know, I look at it in terms of putting the right people in the right roles. And if I have the ability to raise the capital and put the right person in the role, they're going to do a damn sight better than I will by picking up a book and trying to figure it out. Particularly when it's a sort of business that you can't get away with a basic MVP compared to some of the other industries. So, you know, we can't afford to lose our customers' cash. We can't afford to be in breach of anti-money laundering or terrorism regulation. You know, there's a whole ream of stuff that we need to make sure that we're on top of. You know, otherwise we can't operate as a business. So, you know, for us it was making sure that those pieces were in place before even product, because, you know, we spent probably 9 months looking at getting a license, you know, drafting up all our policies and procedures around every one of those pieces of legislation before we really kicked off product development, just because if we can't do all that stuff, we can't have a business at the end of the day. So I would like to, if at some stage I ever survive my startup journey, I would like to spend 6 months on a beach in Bali and maybe read a couple of those Coding for Dummies books.
No, I think you deserve it by the sounds. All right, so who should be using Puntaa? Who should be jumping on?
So I think the core people that we solve a problem for, I mean, just looking at our demographics, and that's not to say, you know, we shouldn't be reaching everyone, but starting off focused, you know, Mick Lubinskas and the guys always drilling in focus for us is, you know, it's that 25 or, you know, young 20s to early 30s male guys that play sport, that, you know, or play computer games or do certain things in that space where they're competitive and they're having a bit of fun. And they're potentially not getting the $5 or $10 they're betting with their mate, but also more than just the financial aspect, the whole social aspect. So, you know, we look at it as, you know, why do I jump on Facebook or Instagram 5 times a day when I shouldn't be? You know, it's because I want to socially engage with what my friends are doing. And why do, you know, guys or girls compete in sport or play computer games with their friends or whatever? It's not even so much the financial transaction or that. It's about the banter, bringing tribes sort of closer together, and that's really sort of how we see our product operating at the end of the day. All of it's sort of built around connecting those people around that engagement with their small group of friends or, you know, in time, potentially clubs and those sorts of things. So, yeah, that's sort of the core group of people that we're currently targeting with our product, and who probably get the most value out of it at the end of the day. Right,
and so like they're chatting and bantering away, and, you know.
Yeah, so we've got
unlucky
a
Nick, I stole your $10 when you thought that David Warner was going to make 50 runs and he went out for 4.
Exactly, but even things, we've got people doing, fitness goals on there, and so for example, you want to, or I want to lose 5 kilograms, and that social validation of I've got several of my friends on the platform, I could post an update, people can comment on those sorts of things. So while there's only a small amount of money associated with it, it's more I'm regularly interacting with a group of people around some sort of activity that we all can get some value out of, and whether that's heckling me or whether that's being supportive, that's up to the user. But
it's still accountability, though, right?
Exactly. So we think there's a big opportunity in the space. That gaming or that sort of betting between friends has been around for however long. And I feel like social now provides a really good opportunity to engage around that aspect of it that potentially has been missed in the last X number of years in online gambling, where it's become really financial transaction. It's a commoditized product, and it's basically you're there to either win or lose money. Whereas we see this as engaging with your friends around an activity and socializing around it, and the money just makes sure you reinforce behavior. Because if you've ever played a round of poker or something, the difference between playing for $0 and even $5 changes the entire aspect of accountability around it. Yeah,
it's really cool. All right, so I ask this question every podcast. Nick, any challenges with self-doubt?
I think definitely. I can't speak for everyone, but I think you'd be lying if you said at different points of the journey it's not, difficult, and some days you have your good days and some days you have your bad days. I think personally I'm a pretty stubborn sort of person, and, I don't let it get to me too much, but that's not to say that there's not days where I think, corporate land and clocking off at 5 p.m. and going up to the beach for the weekend wouldn't be a nice solution. But I think at the end of the day, you're doing it for a specific reason, and everyone's got their own reasons for doing it. But for me, it's really about. I think there's a few things. I think I'm passionate about what I do.
Yep.
I think the one thing that I haven't thought about in the 2 years is I've never been unhappy to get out of bed in the morning.
Right.
And even if I'm facing one of the 15 challenges I've probably told you today and countless others, it's less daunting than going to a job and doing something with my life that I didn't enjoy, that I didn't want to get out of bed and really push hard. And at the end of the day, you're accountable to yourself. And if you can't, get up and face those challenges, you're probably doing the wrong thing. And that, that's, I didn't want to be one of those people that sit in a job for 30 years and complain about it.
Yeah.
At least go and do something else and probably fail. But, enjoy
the journey. At least with this, you're, you're happy with what you're doing, and that you feel like it's contributing to something, right?
Yeah. And, you're building something from scratch that never existed before. I'm never going to be a world-class surfer or an artisan or a musician, but what's my skill set, and it's in business and finance and operations and product and those sorts of things, and I think I'm all right at those sorts of things. So and I get enjoyment out of them. So why not try and shape them into something that I can really enjoy? In terms of self-doubt, though, like we regularly talk about it, even amongst the team, particularly the co-founders. But it's difficult. You know what it's like. It's you have your good days and your bad days, and
your shit days.
Yeah, exactly. And the days where you want to throw the laptop against the wall. But I think the best thing for us has just been not bottling it up inside. But if you're having a crap day or whatever, talk to the other guys. Share, communicate about it, because generally someone else in the team's probably going through something broadly similar, and actually voicing it and getting it out on the table. And do you need a day off, or do you want to, how do we want to tackle this problem? It's not your burden. It's, let's share it.
Yep.
It just helps sort of mitigate some of that. But yeah, I guess I've probably gone around in a circle there, but
all good. That's exactly what I was looking for. So, thanks for being with us today. Where can we find you guys, and you personally?
So I'm very sparse on Twitter, but I think my handle is @Nicholas Heaney.
Okay.
But yeah, our website's www.puntaa.com or .co. Either works. And you can find the apps in both the Apple Store, and for Android, going back to the gaming restriction, they don't allow any gaming platforms, so you can find it on our website at puntaa.co/Android.
Oh, right, okay. Very interesting. Nick, thanks so much for being with us. I'll put all those links in the show notes.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Be The Push podcast. Show notes can be found at bethepush.com/podcast and clicking on the relevant episode link. I appreciate your company and look forward to talking to you again soon.